give them like technical explanations. Hello, good evening, colleagues. Thank you very much for waiting again. Another video conference of foreign ministers of EU member states is over. We are happy to have this press briefing interactively, so not only you can see and hear us, but we can hear and see you if you switch on your cameras and microphones. You know probably how this works. We are keeping the model of the Commission's midday briefing that whenever you want to ask a question after the introductory statement by High Representative, you just use the functionality raise the hand, and then I will try to take the questions as they come in. And then don't forget to switch on the camera so that High Representative can see you as well. And if there are any problems, you can try to contact us then also via WhatsApp or other electronic means. It's still a learning curve for us to mastering all these technologies, but I hope it will work. So with this, I hand over the word to High Representative. Please, you have the floor.
Good evening. Well, although the coronavirus and its implications are still high on our agenda, today's discussions is already an indication that we are gradually returning to the core foreign policy issues. In fact, we started with brief exchanges on the current affairs regarding Libya, Turkey and Afghanistan. On Libya, it's sad to say that the situation does not improve. Neither international appeals nor the threat of the spread of coronavirus managed to stop the warring parties from fighting. And the fighting continues, it's even increasing. We need to further increase our engagement with the most influential international actors and conflict parties to agree on a humanitarian truce. This is needed to deal with the coronavirus, but not only because of that. And on a ceasefire, this is needed for the political process to start and the conflict to end. We also addressed concerns of some member states about the risk of increased migration flows. There will be not sustainable solution to migration challenges until we succeed on stabilizing Libya. And happily, it is not for tomorrow yet. On Turkey, in light of the most recent actions of Turkey related to drilling in the Eastern Mediterranean, we reiterated unwavering solidarity and support to Cyprus and Greece. And I will continue, nevertheless, our diplomatic engagement with Turkey to try to steer our relationship towards a cooperative and constructive approach. On Afghanistan, we have been discussing about the situation where the country is in a political and military stalemate. The peace process is not advancing fast enough, although there has been some positive signs, as the first exchange of prisoners between the Taliban and the Afghanistan government. For our part, together with the international and local partners, including Afghan civil society, the European Union will call for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire so that the country can face the current crisis. After these three current business issues, I then provided updates to the colleagues of the Council on coronavirus-related issues. First, repatriations. EU institutions and member states managed to bring back home over 500,000 of EU citizens. This is one of the biggest successes on the fight against coronavirus. We have done a lot of efforts, and 500,000 of European tourists who were stranded around the world has come back home. We are still having to face the situation of about 90,000 more people, but our efforts will bring them back home on the next days. We reconfirm the determination to implement rapidly the so-called Team Euro package, in total 20 billion euros for the most vulnerable countries. We discussed in particular the possibility of setting us up an European Union humanitarian air bridge to deliver coronavirus-related equipment and facilities, and also to give a hand to the movement of humanitarian staff. I've been talking with the responsible of the World Food Programme, for example, and they told us that the breakdown of the logistic chains and the difficulties coming from closing borders and the closing transport activities is jeopardizing the possibility of reaching some areas in some countries, and humanitarian help cannot reach it. So we are trying to start a humanitarian air bridge. France has been proposing to be the first country that can participate on this humanitarian air bridge, but the Commission, through the means and tools that we have in our humanitarian activities, can provide this new form of helping people to fight against the coronavirus. This humanitarian air bridge will be a visible expression of European solidarity. And together with the Commissioner in charge of the crisis management, we will explore ways to take this forward. We also raised the issue of communication once again, because we are strongly convinced that the visibility of our action is essential. We have to take actions and show that we do. And at the same time, we will continue fighting disinformation. We discussed also how to better support Ukraine and other countries on the Eastern Partnership in the time of coronavirus pandemic, because the problems that were there before the pandemic, they are still there. And our message to them is clear. We will keep helping them in these challenging times. We express a clear support to President Zelensky of Ukraine. He had been making bold steps on reforms and conflict resolution, with a significant progress on reforms, but there are still many obstacles. These efforts have to continue. There was again a strong support for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, including the non-recognition of the illegal annexation of Crimea, support for the implementation of the Minsk Agreement, the work of the Normandy format and of the OSCE. On the Eastern Partnership, the ministers agreed on the current crisis being an opportunity to demonstrate that the European Union is the most reliable partner for these countries. And we have discussed how we can support them so that their economies, jobs and institutions do not suffer from this situation, and that a drive for reforms remains high in our agenda. The June Eastern Partnership Summit, which I expect to be maintained, should be a good occasion to reaffirm this support to the region, but also to advance work on concrete areas of cooperation, sustainable economic growth and job creation, in line with the Eastern Partnership communication issued on the last 18th of March. Finally, we also agreed that we need to continue addressing disinformation in the region, which is already a real battlefield of disinformation. This was the summary of our discussions today through video conference, and now I am ready for your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I just remind you, colleagues, journalists listening and watching, that you can use the functionality Raise Your Hand, which is basically visible on your screen when you click on your name. I already see two hands raised. So Dmitro Shurko is first one. Please introduce then your media as well. You're asking question. Dmitro Shurko.
Which media?
Dmitry Shkurko, National News Agency of Ukraine. Do you follow me? So I have two questions, if I may. Today, European Commission put forward proposal of macrofinancial assistance to 10 countries, including Ukraine, and to tackle the coronavirus. But it was some conditions that should be followed to make these assistance to continue. I just want to know what kind of recommendations should these countries fulfill to get the second installment of these assistance in the end of this year.
Okay.
And the second part of that question is...
Dmitro, can I just jump in? Because we don't hear you very well. Maybe if you could move the mic closer to your mouth and try to speak a little bit slowly, and if you could just rephrase your question with one or two sentences, because the connection is not really very audible.
What condition should be followed by the countries which are 10 countries should get assistance of against the coronavirus, in fighting against the coronavirus?
So what are the
and what does it mean, the highly viral terms? And the second question, if I may, related situation on Donbass. If a corona-related situation on occupied territories would come out of control, like that happened in Russia, for example, it will be great problem for entire area.
Okay, we got it, Dmitro. So the second question was like, what about Donbass and the situation in the eastern Ukraine with the coronavirus? If it gets out of control, how would this complicate the situation there? So basically, whether this was discussed with the minister.
There is no sign that the situation is getting out of control. I was talking yesterday with the Foreign Affairs Minister of Ukraine, and also the Danish Foreign Affairs Minister organized a conference call with several ministers with Ukraine, and there is no sign at all that the situation in Donbass is getting out of control due to the coronavirus. And don't anticipate the problems. By the time being, it's nothing that can create this alarm. For sure, the situation in Donbass makes more difficult to provide health care and to transport medical tools. It's not the same thing to work in a hospital in a peaceful city that to provide health cares in the middle of a war. But by the time being, I insist, nothing shows that the situation in Donbass is going to be out of control due to the coronavirus. And about the conditions that these countries has to fulfill in order to receive help for the coronavirus, there is no specific conditions. In fact, the only thing that we have done is to reorient it, to reassess the resources that were already allocated to the Eastern Partnership countries in order to give priority to the fight against coronavirus, as we did first with our European Union team with respect to other states, mainly in Africa, that receive our partnership help. No specific conditions. The only one is these resources be allocated to the fight against the coronavirus specifically.
Thank you. Second question, Yuri Sheiko, hopefully a better quality.
Hello. Hello. Do you hear me now? Okay. So, Herr Representative, I have two questions also on Ukraine. While talking about reforms in Ukraine, you said that there are still obstacles remaining. So can you explain a little bit more what EU is expecting from Ukraine to do in the reform process, like a couple of things that the EU is expecting from Ukraine to do? And the second question, you plan to go to Ukraine, but because of coronavirus pandemic, you couldn't do this. Can you confirm that your first foreign visit after the limitations due to the pandemic will be lifted, that your first visit will be to Ukraine? Can you confirm this? Thank you very much.
So you heard the question.
The first question, yeah, but
The second was whether after the restrictions are lifted, whether your first trip abroad will be to Ukraine.
Yes, that's what I agreed yesterday with the Foreign Affairs Minister. You know, the last travel that I had to cancel before the crisis was to Ukraine. I was insisting to my team that we should go to Ukraine, but they convinced me that it was not a good idea. And immediately after we took the decision of not traveling to Ukraine, everybody started closing borders and the flights were cancelled. So finally, it was unavoidable. And the first thing I will do when the normal comes again is to visit Ukraine and to pay a lot of attention to the Eastern Partnership. Yesterday I was also talking with the Foreign Affairs Minister of Belarus, and I think that as my travel to the eastern part of borders of Europe will also include Belarus. And what are we expecting from Ukraine? Well, to fulfill the commitments and to implement the reforms that everybody knows about the rule of law, freedom of media, fight against corruption. And from this point of view, President Zelensky has been doing a lot. And we know that there are obstacles. For example, how many thousands of amendments have been presented to the last law that he has presented about freedom of press. And I know that they will have to change the rules of procedure of the Parliament in order to cope with this enormous amount of amendments, which is a way of trying to obstruct the approval of law. And from this point of view, we strongly support what they are trying to do. I insist, it's nothing more and nothing less that the rule of law, fight against corruption, independence of the judiciary, freedom of the press, things that are the cornerstone of the political system in the European Union countries.
Thank you. Next raised hand. And colleagues, those of you who asked the question, if you could unraise your hand, please, then it makes it better overview on my screen. So next one was Laura Kostan. I think it's the German television.
Yes, can you hear me?
Very well.
Okay. So my question is on Libya. In view of the corona crisis, the Maltese Minister of Foreign Affairs has asked for a new humanitarian aid package for Libya with a sum of 100 million euros in order to prevent refugees crossing to Malta. And several member states seem to be in favor of such a package. Has this been a point of discussion today? And if so, what are the conditions for such an aid package? And what could this aid look like more concretely?
No, this was not an important issue. Malta has not been asking for a help package. What do you mean, a help package? No. Malta has been warning about the possibility of having to face a wave of migrants arriving to the island coming from Libya. They were worried about the possibility that the situation in Libya was going to push more migrants to try to go through the Mediterranean, and they were preparing for that, but they explained us that the island has all the health system busy and even overcrowded by their own problem, and they would be in difficulties in order to face a new wave of migrants. But we haven't agreed on any specific package of help to Malta for that. Just we received this concern, which is a legitimate concern, but it has not been followed by any kind of decision of providing Malta a specific package of help.
On Libya, she was asking also about Libya, if specific help to Libya.
It's been, as all countries of our immediate neighborhood, where we have been reorienting the amount of resources already allocated to Libya in order not only to increase their healthcare capacities, but also to give resources to the Libyan Coast Guard to continue patrolling the territorial waters of Libya. One thing that's important I would like to notice is the fact that the countries of the so-called Visegrad Group has been providing 35 million euros through the African Fund in order to help Libya to increase their health capacities to fight the coronavirus. And it's something that they have to thank a lot to these countries.
Thank you. Next question, Robin Emott, Reuters.
Thank you, Peter. Hi, Rep. My question is related to COVID-19. I wondered, does the EU support the investigation into the origins of COVID-19 proposed by Australia? And if so, what should its scope be and who should it target? Thank you.
We didn't hear you very well. So the investigation.
A thorough understanding of the epidemiology of the coronavirus pandemic is essential as the basis for public authorities to take decisions regarding public health, the global economy and the freedom of movement. We also welcome any kind of support through scientific inquiries into the origin of the coronavirus, which has created an unprecedented global health crisis with a strong social and economic impact. I think that transparency, scientific research, free of constraint are vital for improving the quality of decision-making by public authorities and ensure prevention. And there may well be lessons to be learned about the response to the coronavirus pandemic, both at the level of each individual country and also internationally. And this will be an important action to be implemented in the future to prevent further global crisis. But for now, the priority has to be on facing the pandemics, saving lives, and containing this spread. We will only defeat the pandemic through global efforts, cooperation, and this cooperation cannot be jeopardized for blaming one or the other about the origin of the pandemics. But I insist that a full understanding of the epidemiology of coronavirus is essential as the basic to take decisions and prevent this happen again.
Thank you. A question from a colleague who cannot connect but send the question in writing, Maria Psara. Yes, this is my question. Did the ministers discuss about Turkey, which is a comment of the High Representative on the illegal Turkish activities in the Western, I think she means Eastern Mediterranean? Will this issue be discussed at European Council tomorrow? So she's asking about the Turkish activities in the Eastern Mediterranean.
Well, about that, I already said that the Council has expressed its worries about these activities and express also full support to Cyprus. I don't think tomorrow in the European Council is going to be discussed. I think the Council tomorrow will be fully devoted to the economic answer to the coronavirus crisis.
Thank you. And indeed, this press conference is about the discussion of the ministers today at the video conference replacing Foreign Affairs Council. Okay, I think we have time for one more question. Jerome Hughes has raised hand. So, Jerome, you can introduce your media and ask your question. If you can hear us. Go ahead. You are unmuted, so we don't hear you. Try again.
Oh my God, the communication is really awful.
It's the first try.
Sorry about this. Can you hear me?
Okay, now we can hear you, yes.
Thank you very much. Just, High Representative, following the meeting on the 23rd of March, you said that the foreign affairs ministers had basically agreed that they would support a request being made by Tehran for support, a loan of €5 billion from the International Monetary Fund. And now we understand that the United States is resisting, is pushing it back against this, that the United States doesn't want Tehran to get this loan from the IMF. So what's your reaction to that? And also on the sanctions against Iran, I raise Iran because, of course, it's one of the worst affected countries outside of Europe. On the sanctions, would you support the United States, or would you support a move, would you support pressure on the United States to lift sanctions against Tehran?
We have already said, through a communication of the Council, that we support the idea that on this time sanctions cannot affect the humanitarian trade, the humanitarian supplies. The Americans have been insisting, when I talk with them, that on their sanctions there is nothing that can affect this help. The problem is not the trade. The problem is the capacity of Iran to have the capital, to have the resources to buy, to pay for the resources they need in order to fight against the coronavirus. And for that humanitarian fact, they have needs they cannot fulfill due to the fact that they don't have the capital required for that. But we supported, first, to soften the sanctions, and second, the request of Iran to the International Monetary Fund for getting financial help. I regret that the Americans in the United States are opposing the International Monetary Fund to take this decision. I think that for the humanitarian point of view, this decision, this request should have been accepted. But according with the rule of the International Monetary Fund, it's not, if the states oppose, it's not possible. I've been talking with the managing director of the IMF, who already anticipated me that it was going to be difficult. I know if the decision has already been taken, but if the decision is taken of refusing this request from Iran, I really deeply regret for humanitarian reasons.
Thank you. So this was the last answer. Thank you very much, High Representative. Thank you, colleagues, also for bearing with us and for your patience with the technical issues. So I would like to thank also the technical team making this press conference possible, and also our interpreters. Have a nice evening and see you soon.
Thank you. Thank you.